Welcome. We're going to look at solving a word problem using a ratio or proportion. Now, instead of a word problem, think of it as just an application of something. We're going to apply a ratio to this. So let's look at what's being said. Cedra paints 400 square feet in this amount of time, 2.5 hours. How long would what would the amount of time be if she was painting a larger amount, 720 square feet? So there are a couple of ways to think about this, and we're going to do this as a couple of different proportions just to show you the different ways to think of it. First thing is it's really hard to work with fractions and these kind of things, so let's make that 2.5. So we'll call it 2.5 hours. So I am going to set up a ratio where it's going to be the square feet over the amount of time. Okay, so in one sense, by doing so, we can find out how many square feet in 1 hour that you see that's doing. And that's another way of looking at doing the problem. So it's 400 square feet over 2.5 hours. Okay, now that is how much that she's actually doing. If she were to increase it to 720 square feet, we don't know how much time. But now notice what I did. I made it equal to. Well, if she keeps at the same speed, which, could be iffy because she gets tired, stops for lunch, someone comes in to distract her or talk to her, runs out of paint, has to go get more. There's numerous things that come up. But let's assume none of that happens and she stays at the same speed doing this. All right, so what we have is a proportion, and when you have this and you have just two fractions or ratios on both sides, you can just simply cross multiply. I'm going to solve this one by doing 400x equals 720 times 2.5. Or I'll put parentheses because the dot kind of thing gets mistaken as a decimal sometimes. So let's not do that because parentheses also means multiplying. So this is 400x equals 1,800. And when you divide, the zeros are canceling out, and you have 18 over 4, which is 4.5 or 4.5. So what we're going to say is that's 4.5 hours. So 4.5 hours is probably how we'd say it. If you did 4.5, you can get away with it, but it's not normally how we speak about in time. Right. Now, there's another way to think of this too. Notice that here I did square feet over time. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it sort of a little differently. I'm going to do square foot of the smaller one over the square feet of the larger one as equal to the time of the smaller divided by the time of the larger. Now, that's a ratio in a way. It still is. It's just not self-contained. Like these two here, the square feet over the time, those go together because they make up a pair. I mean, specifically, they naturally fit each other. Here, though, we're going to do it comparing the feet, the smaller to the larger of each. And let's see what happens when we do that. Right, so the square feet of the smaller is 400. The square feet of the larger is 720. And that's equal to the time of the smaller, 2.5. And we don't yet know, even though we do from this problem, we don't really know yet if we're doing just this other method now, how much that is. So first thing I do is cancel out those zeros, and then I will cross multiply. So I have 40x equals 72 times 2.5. Okay, so I'm going to have 40x again equals, I'm going to make sure I get the exact right number for 72 times 2.5. And that's 180. So now x equals 180 over 40. Again, those zeros cancel out. We get the same 18 over 4. So we get the same 4.5. So we get 4.5 hours. All right, now let's think about what this means. We get the same thing. What happened here is in this equation, we set up square feet over time, but we were careful to keep them in the same pair. These are the smallers, these are the larger ones. There has to be that consistency where things match correctly. Over here on this one, we did a different proportion, but it still has the consistency we need. We kept this side for the square feet and this side for the time. But it still meant that this part was smaller to larger and this one was smaller to larger. If we had done larger to smaller for either one of them, we would have gotten a different answer. It would have been wrong because we weren't consistent. So a key thing to think about these is stay consistent in setting up your proportions. Consistent in setting up the proportions. Now let's take a look at this next one. We have a map scale. And I'm going to, let's take a look at what this means. Give me a moment to, okay. So we're going to do the same kind of thinking here. We have a map scale. The scale itself tells you how far things are apart based on inches or centimeters. So 4 inches leads to 100 miles. We could even say, if we wanted to, therefore, that 1 inch is 25 miles, but we're going to stick with this one for this problem. 2 cities are 9 inches apart. So using this scale, let's make a proportion with it. So I'm going to use the scale part and then the map. Okay. So the scale says 4 inches over 100 miles. And I'm going to make that equal to the map says 9 inches over, we don't know how many miles. So we're going to cross multiply. Right? And if I had included miles here, inches and miles will all cancel out. So right now I just won't include them as I work it out here. 9 times 100 is 900. So now when I divide that, x equals 225. So this is going to say 225 miles. Now let's do it in a different way because it's the same kind of thinking anyway. Oh, I want to put yellow around that one. Okay. Oops. Just like on the last problem, I'm just going to do it with the other type of method where now I'm going to put inches, or rather the map inches, to the reality, the real actual number of miles for them. So if I put 4 inches here, though, I have to make sure when I set up the proportion that the number of miles that goes with it is over here. So in other words, this is the smaller and this is the larger. 9 inches, and we don't know how many yet if we hadn't done the first one. Now we do the same exact kind of cross multiplying. Guess what? We get the same answer. So what it did was it switched this 109 with that 900 just because of whether they were miles or on the map or inches or not. But it works out fine as long as you're consistent with it. Again, that's the key thinking, key word for any of these is being consistent. All right, I hope that helps with this section, at least for these particular ways of looking at these things. Thank you for watching and listening.